Recording, good. Thank you. We're ticking along through different road user groups, ensuring that we consider all road user groups when we're doing our road safety audit. And today we are jumping in and having a chat about cyclists and motorcyclists. So just like we did with pedestrians and a bit with heavy vehicles and the like, we can't go into a lot of detail and a lot of depth, but we can just grab a few things that we should be considering and just ensuring we switch that light bulb on to think about this road user group as we're doing all audits. So as per usual, pop your questions in the chat as we go. Kathy's behind the scenes there. We're going to have a look at some of the requirements for cyclists for safe travel. We're going to point you at some technical information. And yeah, I've got a series of common road safety audit issues when we're considering bikes and some different facilities, treatments and terminology. So this is a sort of general cycling requirements. There's different sort of lists of things people say that you should be providing for cyclists, and I think they all have merit, and this is just one of them. But separation, clear sight lines, space to ride, good surface. Speed maintenance is an interesting one. I'll talk about that, and it's linked to safety later. Connectivity and information. But you can kind of boil it down that auditors need to think like cyclists or think like people that ride bikes, and that often isn't too hard for a lot of auditors because they do ride bikes or they have ridden bikes, or it's something that quite a few people do. You do need to think a little bit beyond just your basic riding and think holistically, but I'll point you at a few things you can do when you're doing an audit to consider that. But simple questions: would I feel safe using that road if I was riding? If I turned here, could a car see me? I've got sightline impediments, and I'm in the dooring zone. So these are all good questions to ask. But beyond just, would I feel safe? We're trying to sort of cater for this variety of people that ride bikes, and it is probably the road user group with the biggest, let's say, varied setup. So yes, we've got the 8-year-old, the 80-year-old, and that's a common little design thing to think. Are you designing for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old? You should likely capture everything in between. It works, in my experience, a bit better for pedestrians, because if you're really catering well for those, you really do capture every pedestrian, as long as you're thinking about also people with mobility needs and the like. But for cyclists, yes, it's great to do this, but there's also cargo bikes. There's also the lycra-clad training riders, the mammals, as they're often called, the middle-aged men in lycra. Courier style bikes. So you just have this very diverse group. So sometimes designing facilities and thinking about their needs is quite varied. I suppose in terms of us road safety auditing and looking for guidance around thinking about people that ride bikes, there is quite a bit of information out there. It's really quite well supplied. So the Australia's Guide Part 6 certainly has the prompt list back that have questions that you should be asking as an auditor to consider pedestrians and cyclists. So that's a good way to go. There's a bit of, certainly the Safe System Audit Guidelines at a principal level are ensuring that you consider all road users. There's this Shared Path Audit Guidelines, which is an old Vic Roads document. It's not particularly Victorian practice, It's just a decent guidance document. So you can do road safety audits or safe system audits on shared path facilities. It's the same process, except for, there's a little bit more guidance in there about, riding the route and some of the tolerances you'd expect bikes to be able to handle and not handle. And New Zealand has some really good guidance, and I only pick a couple of the things. Many of you will know that heaps more sources of wonderful information. Certainly the cycling network guidance page and associated materials is very good from Wakakatahi there, and the cycling infrastructure guide document there from Auckland Transport, also a good document. And there's lots of other supplementary ones from around Australia, which are pretty good and pretty relevant for New Zealand conditions as well. And then around the world, there's just a heap of things you can look at. These are just, well, the CROW manual is sort of the cycling infrastructure Bible. Many of you will be aware of CROW. That one. Really great document, and if you're doing stuff in bike infrastructure, you should get yourself a copy of that. It's wonderful. And then I popped in there a few other safety audits for bike documents from around the world. I might jump in just a few common findings to just get us warmed up for today. Longitudinal grates is an issue, that's very particular for cyclists. I suppose pedestrians wouldn't enjoy it much, but that picture, a bike going into a longitudinal grate and the rider coming off is what we're considering. I don't think I've seen a design that's planning to install a longitudinal grate. I haven't seen that for a decade. Designers are pretty good at not doing that. But what I do find as a road safety auditor is that they'll be doing alterations to an existing bit of road, or diverting cyclists through an area because maybe they're doing construction, or it's a new bike route or something like that, and there is an existing longitudinal grate, and the cyclists are sort of going through that area. So very simple one to sort of look out for. I've got a couple of expert witness legal cases associated with this. One was an interesting one where a shopping centre was being redeveloped. As part of that redevelopment, they were building a lot of bicycle parking, like a storage area, what do you call it? Like a little pumping and maintenance station, and lots of signage to encourage bikes off a separated shared path facility to, this is the way to the shopping centre. It's a wonderful thing to be doing. The issue was that the way that they were directing them all went through their car park area, which was just lined with these longitudinal grates, bigger ones than these. And yeah, somebody went through in late dusk and fell into one and seriously injured themselves. So we're trying to, I suppose, address that and think holistically. Another common finding, well, common may be an exaggeration. It's happened a handful of times that we've seen this, but one to have a think about. So this design came in to do cycling infrastructure upgrades. Some of it not really infrastructure, just paint, but there were some infrastructure parts to it. This T intersection here as you see with the red arrows, that's how the signal phasing goes. So it's one of the phases. So the vehicles go out while the left turn arrow is on. And if they were planning to put bicycle storage boxes at the front there, so just a way for cyclists to get out ahead of the pack and be in view and the like. But obviously, when this setup happens, it's it's not going to be good. Now, like to risk assess that is a very challenging thing. I certainly look at it and go, I really don't think that a driver is not going to see a cyclist. They're right in front of them, but they're going to be, it's sort of going to be a road rage issue more than anything else here. And it's kind of hard to get to a crash associated with this. You can probably start to, talk about it with a vehicle maybe going around the cyclist, and there could be issues there. In the end, for this audit, we actually just put it as a to note. I thought, I'll just make that to note, and those sort of things get fixed, because that's not going to be a good situation. And if they build it like that, that'll be very quick that they'll be getting some public pushback. Now, I do have a little, I suppose, quiz. It's more of a visual quiz and get you looking for some issues in an existing site.
Yeah, Ken, we've got, it looks like it's 50-50. We've got some sound issues for you.
I can plug in a microphone.
Yeah, should we give that a go?
Oh, people are saying it's fine.
Yeah, but I think it's fine for some and not for others. So maybe could we try a microphone? I'm not sure if which end it's on, but
yeah, I was going to say if it's fine for some, I'm pretty sure it's not my end, but
okay.
I'm happy to try and sort that out. How about I put the quiz up and I give people a few minutes to look for issues, they type it in, and then I'll play with that and see what I can do.
Perfect.
Okay, it could just be my voice being crackly as well. Okay, here it is. What I want you to do is be a road safety auditor on the existing conditions, and find me issues, safety issues for cyclists. Type them into the chat.
So the question is, and you may have gathered this from some of the answers that are already coming in. What we're looking for here is what road safety issues you see. Having a look at this image here. Just checking, am I crackly or sound issues on my end, or is it perhaps?
For me, yeah, crystal clear, Kathy.
Crystal clear. Might just be a bit rough. Maybe I'll take over for the rest of the session, Ken.
Do a better job, I'm sure.
Okay. Again, wonderful answers coming in.
All right. I've changed onto a professional grade microphone here, Kathy.
Looks like a dead animal, Ken. But anyway, not to worry.
In the audio industry, this is called a dead cat.
Ah, okay, good. Terrific.
There you go. Actually, that could be a trivia. What is this object?
Okay, I'll add it in there. All right, so lots of responses coming in about sight lines. So the no sight to the right, poor visibility, can't see the vehicles. I guess if you're a cyclist, and I imagine the vehicles probably can't see the cyclist as well. So yeah, lots of people have mentioned that one. Great in the cyclist path.
Yeah, well done. I just gave you a good explanation of that one. So I think Juliana, I think, was first, catch bit on the way. So there could be a prize there. I think the fence is a really interesting and good one. And we'll chat about that a bit. Lots of, good points coming through. And Sue's asked a good question there. Well, she's pointed out, okay, so cyclists dismount. Sue's asking why is that the case? And well, that I'm sure is the case because there are no sight line, the fence is blocking that sight line. So they're saying, okay, cyclists, you dismount, you walk across safely and get back on. So does that alleviate the sight line issue? I mean, we've told them to dismount. Pretty much for me, if I see a cyclist dismount sign as a road safety auditor, I go, oh, okay, the issues, they're flagging issues for me here. This is good. And I feel that cyclist dismount sign are about the most useless sign on the public road network. We know cyclists are just not going to, they're not going to abide by that. It doesn't alleviate the actual issue. It may make some traffic engineers somewhere feel they've done something, but we're not addressing the issue. And this one is the height of ridiculousness, really, isn't it? Where you're seeing that sort of stuff. But back to our one here. Yeah, what we'd be really looking to do with that sightline impediment is either, cutting back the fence if you could, work with the landowner, and as an auditor you certainly can recommend that. It becomes a little problematic for the actual council or others to work on that. But even if you do that, you want to be looking at managing speeds of vehicles on this road down. I mean, raising this whole thing would be one thing that would certainly help. You could do speed calming treatments further back, and you could give priority for the park if you wanted, but you slow vehicles coming down. So this is just a much lower risk scenario. It's the speed of that vehicle is going to be the part that's the problematic one. So questions come in, could you put a bike chicane in place to make people dismount through it? Like that is an option. It's discouraged these days as a treatment for where a cyclist path meets a road, and that's primarily from a encouragement of cycling, making cycling a popular mode, not having cyclists to stop and get off every 100 meters every time they meet these areas. We would prefer to provide that road, that path of priority and slow cars down and make that the less attractive one. But that's from a sort of modality perspective, and that should be played out at the strategic planning level and those sorts of things. From an order perspective, yes, I mean, in theory, that can provide a safer facility. It's really annoying for bike riders. And I'm an everyday rider myself, and I would, really dislike that. So I discourage it from that perspective. But just from a pure safety perspective, it has merit. Okay, well, in a similar sort of vein, I mean, this is a road safety order. I bring this up for a few reasons. It sort of shows this sightline issue of offences. They're brand new big subdivision. and they've decided to make shared paths to bike and pedestrian paths, and they're right up on property lines. And you can see here, that's a garage. So cars will be coming out of that, obviously, and the crossovers there. And you've got your shared path. So they're telling people to ride their bike along there. And so we've got a sightline issue and the fence there. And so pointed that out, and then we make the recommendation to have cut downs there and open up those sight lines and the like. Now, this became a very interesting one, and it's some learning for you as a road safety auditor. That report was handed over to the local government who had engaged our team to undertake this road safety audit. It had a whole lot of other recommendations and findings as well. And they said, thanks for all of that. And this property access one, can you please delete that out of the audit and reissue the audit, please, because that's actually part of our structure plan guideline standards or whatever it was, and it's all been signed off, and that's all approved. We can't do anything about that. And so as an auditor, you go, well, I know that's going to be hard and annoying for you, but we have to leave it in the audit because we've identified it. It's an issue. Because it's hard for you to rectify doesn't mean it's not an audit finding. So then they are very annoyed and frustrated about this, and really, I mean, this is where we have this responsible officer column, and they should be writing, do you accept this or not? And that's do you accept that this is an issue? Right? If they say, actually, we don't think that's a risk at all, then they go, no, and then they write their reasoning behind that. And that's all fine. Or they write, yep, we agree it's an issue and we're going to rectify it. Or yes, and here's description of what we're going to do instead of maybe what that recommendation is. But they wanted it actually removed out. And that's a no in auditing, that they can't dictate what we put in the audit. We are independent. We've provided it as it is. Now, this will be interesting as it plays out in safe system auditing in New Zealand, as you have those client meetings before you even issue the report. You probably have some of this discussion with them. And that's where probably you've got to stick to your guns in terms of, if you've identified an issue, it's got to be reported, but you can maybe work with them on this, like, what are you going to recommend? In this case, actually, they were very angry at this whole idea that we're going to continue to put this in. It remained in the report. It caused a lot of challenges for them. Council had to pay the money for some of these fence rectifications, and they changed their structure plan. And so, from a safety perspective, I feel we had a win. I mean, it's the biggest issue I've ever seen out there, but it was an issue, and it stuck to it, and and so that was good. I mean, they've never talked to us again, but that's okay. Sometimes you got to push along some of these safety findings. Just a reminder that any surface issue like this is certainly an issue for a rider if they hit it, but also thinking about the fact that most riders will see something like this and change their riding line, and it may be that they go into areas that are more problematic if there are surface issues. So think about both challenges there. Another common, actually, this is the first thing to notice about this, and this is quite a common road safety audit finding, even if it's a design or a safe system audit finding. Your lanes won't line up through an intersection. So you can see that this lane here, that sort of runs directly onto the footpath, and this one runs there. So what you can, without knowing anything, you know you're going to have some side swipe crashes around that area where this person's sort of going along and they go towards that lane because that's what they think, and somebody's there, we're going to have that issue. it's the cyclists sort of getting mixed up in this whole thing that are the most vulnerable and the ones that will be injured. So you can have a look at your your lanes lining up for new intersections and making sure that's all as good as possible. You can certainly put, well, this intersection has it, RPMs, so raised pavement markers. These are not RPMs, raised reflective pavement markers. These are just the little dome ones. And you've got to put them in the right spot, obviously. So that helps a bit, but ideally you get that all lined up properly. And cyclists are here, it's usually very problematic. Our best possible treatment are protected intersections where you would have, the cycle, some sort of island there and some sort of island there. So the cyclist sort of gets a protected path through all of this. And we're seeing some more of those coming out around Australia and New Zealand. I say New Zealand, I believe there's some designs floating around. I don't think anything's been built. I can show you some of the Australian examples of that shortly. Another problematic spot for cyclists is that merge point. So if there's a stand-up lane at an intersection, so that's where an intersection sort of like an extra lane appears at an intersection. We call that a stand-up lane, and then it goes back, and that's just for each traffic signal phase. You're trying to get as much through it as you can in terms of traffic, cars. But cyclists, again, it's a challenge because you've got these cars trying to, merge into one, looking over their shoulder, and the whole area is a bit of a mess. So you can head start bikes off early, give them a run. You can do those protected intersections, which help in these scenarios. Protected bike lanes are the real huge benefit in all of these sorts of scenarios, which I'll show you examples of shortly and point out some things that we need to have a think about as road safety auditors. So cyclists and roundabouts has always been an interesting topic. This is the old guidance of Austroads and Kotahi in terms of how you would design a roundabout, which is essentially an urban one-lane roundabout. It used to be that you'd say, well, let's try to get the cyclists as far off the edge as possible. So push them out here for that riding path. And that way they're, away from cars. And it was sort of discovered that caused two safety issues. One was cars trying to overtake cyclists through roundabouts because they had a little bit of space, and we saw cyclists getting clipped, and we saw other incidents like that. The second was that when a vehicle's coming up here and they look out, there's a phenomenon called look but fail to see. The psychologists, behavioral psychologists, human factors people love it, and love it as a concept, and they really get into it, do PhDs on it and the like. But it's essentially that a car driver will be approaching, they will look out here and they'll have no sightline impediments or anything like that, and a cyclist will be approaching, but they won't act, they won't stop. The cyclist will just get struck. Called a look but fail to see crash. And the reason the behavioral psychologists get so excited about it is, they get into things like threat theory, saying, well, it's, a truck would be a threat, so you're going to be more reactive to that. None of that's like conscious going on. Well, that's not a threat, so it's all subconscious, and then people think we're good. But one of the things is the position expected to see something, and there was quite a bit of theory around this, that being further out to the side here was less likely, and if you could have cyclists more in a central position, they would be more likely to react. So all of that combined meant that there was then quite a bit of guidance and suggestion that you use or you get cyclists to claim the lane. using these things. Prize, what's that thing called? I'm sure many of you know that. A Sharrow, well done, Hillary, first there. Followed by lots of other, yes, so it stands for a shared arrow. So the idea is that a bike would come in here and claim the lane, so no car can do that overtaking maneuver, and that a vehicle down here is looking at that central spot. It seems to work well for very confident or reasonably confident cyclists, but you're really not going to send your 8-year-old out to claim the lane, are you? And it's not going to encourage a lot of cycling from that perspective. So we sort of have evolved beyond that. But if you, in the time between being able to do something more substantial, this is a better treatment than leaving a bike lane on the outside of a roundabout. Come back to 2-lane roundabouts, actually. Oh, there was a Wally there. So I'll come back to that. But I just want to talk about 1-lane roundabouts and, what is actual best practice? Well, best practice is to provide a priority cyclist treatment around the outside of the roundabout on a raised platform. This type of setup is exceptional in terms of the safety performance for people that ride bikes, pedestrians in this case as well. It is encouraging of, a lot of people will feel safe riding their bike through this area, and people will be confident to do it. So that's it's a Dutch style roundabout. The Dutch have been doing this for a long, long time. This one's in Melbourne. Anybody who comes to Melbourne, I'll take you for a ride through this. But yeah, I mean, the idea is you keep all your good roundabout features, and you get the bikes to use this facility, and they go all the way around it. If they want to do a right turn, they'll sort of go all the way around the outside.
Ken, just a quick question. So Janko's asking, will this actually work outside of the Netherlands? I assume we're talking about this one on our screen at the moment, as New Zealand drivers won't be used to it. And Sean's made a comment saying very narrow lanes, even for one direction. And Marie's jumped in with, there are similar examples in New Zealand, Richmond near Nelson.
Yeah, so this one is in Melbourne, not in the Netherlands, and we evaluated it by mounting cameras up on those utility poles for a few weeks, and it performs really, really well. Over 80% of cyclists use this for navigating through the roundabout. The other sort of, I think it's about 17% or something, actually just still use the roundabout like a roundabout, but they're usually the sort of lycra clad or very, very confident type utility style cyclists. Most of the commuters and others use the facility. The interaction with cars has been fine. There's a little bit of an issue, and I think Sean's just popping that in the chat as well. There's a little bit of an issue where you get cars are waiting to go into the roundabout, one's there, and then one sort of props right over the middle of it. But the slow pace of this and the path means that the cyclists sort of just navigate around it, and there hasn't been I mean, this has been in for 4 years or something, and we haven't had a reported cyclist incident. There's been, minor annoyances and those sort of things, and our evaluation sort of pointed out a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean,
what about queuing in the roundabout itself? So
yep, and that's right. So this car, for example, if they go to here, but they're looking for cyclists, so there's a stream of cyclists and people walking, so they do that. Then the car behind them wants to go in, so then the roundabout's blocked. And I mean, so the local council here is a very proactive sustainable transport council, and they basically have a standard letter for people complaining about the time it takes them to drive through this area now that basically says, "Hey, thanks for your concerns. This is a pedestrian bike priority area. We suggest you consider taking an alternative form of transport, or it's going to be a bit slower if you choose to take your car." I was just like, "That's great!" Like that is their strategy, and they actually just go, "That's the choice we made." And it's not really a safety issue at all. It's just about, which mode are you going to prioritize through this site? And they decided to prioritize people on bikes and walking over pushing the vehicles through. Because a conventional roundabout, those cars will continue to just stream through, and it'll be a much smoother flow for anybody in a vehicle. But it's bad for people riding their bike. They have to battle against cars, and people walking just find it a real struggle to often cross roundabouts, especially older people, because you've got to make the judgment: are they going to turn in, and I've got to pick my gaps and do the chicken run across the? It's not a So this sort of stuff's good, and like regardless of even if you have the bike facility itself, just a grazed pedestrian crossing on all legs on an urban roundabout is wonderful, and is very much a done thing, and that's certainly done a lot in New Zealand. So,
okay, more questions and comments, please, Ken. It seems like this design adds potential conflict points for cyclists as opposed to just travelling through like a car. Can you comment on that?
I would say it doesn't. I mean, the conflict points are sort of technically, it depends how you define a conflict point, I suppose. If you get a cyclist to claim the lane, then you might say, well, there's only then the conflict point of the vehicle coming in against them. So actually, no, I wouldn't say there are more conflict points, because you're still going to have that conflict point. Because if a bike was to come through here, I mean, that's your conflict point. But now the bike goes through here, and that's your conflict point. So you don't really have the rear end potential or the swipe potential the way you have if you push the cyclist through in the circulating carriageway. Anyway, I've probably got to keep moving on, Kathy.
Sorry, just one more thing. Yeah, there's some great commentary about it feels more comfortable cycling through a roundabout like this than one without any protection. Shamar saying, I think in New Zealand now you have to start putting additional giveaway road markings to show the priority to pedestrians and cyclists. And one more question about thoughts on safety with sharrows in general. I heard some commentary from overseas that they can reduce safety, but maybe that's where they're used in inappropriate places.
What are your thoughts on sharrows, Kathy? You don't hide your thoughts on them?
No, but apparently opinions of one person are not, I think they're rubbish. So I'm not claiming the lane. I think it's a bit of paint to tick a box and move on. But anyway, apologies to the people who invented sharrows and those who use them.
No,
that's a cop-out. Sean, that's not a cop-out.
I think it was a cop-out for me to handle it.
To flick it to me from the design. It is a cop-out from the designers, yeah. But sorry, I think apparently they can be used in some places, saves dollars, whatever. But yeah.
I think, so I've done, so we've had a look at sharrows and their potential in higher speed environments, and it wasn't like a empirical study and analysis. It was more of a think tank of designers and the like, and safety experts. And really, it was deemed that would present a safety issue if it's a high speed environment. And in a low speed environment, We believed it, had enough to add safety if you weren't able to do something fundamental like this. But it's the acknowledgement that it's just not going to get used by a fair bulk of cyclists. They're not going to actively claim that lane. Okay. So the intersections are always problematic. This just a standard intersection, signalized intersection, and because these are often urban environments that we're trying to get cyclists through, we do find that we have a lot of signalized intersections, and you've got problematic things associated with you. You've got a left turn lane like this. You've got a conflict point back here as the left turning vehicle has to weave across the cyclist, and we know that's a problematic area. If you don't have that left turn, you've got the possibility of the vehicle turning over the cyclist, and it causes challenges. As a little aside, the raising of an intersection like this one in Christchurch has some pretty significant safety benefits for cyclists as well as pedestrians and other vehicles. That's not quite why I popped the slide up, but I do very much enjoy this one. And yes, Anne-Marie's pointed out where that one is. But this is the way we know, and I mentioned this before, if you're able to have your cycle facility and then provide that protected run through for bike riders, that's where that's our gold standard for a signalized intersection for navigating bikes through it. The public hates the raised intersection. Yeah. Well, go back and have a look in a few months, like 6 months after it's there, and nobody will be commenting on it. It just becomes the norm. It's something because it's different, it's new. People, of course, people are going to comment on that. When we are thinking about cyclists in our designs, you've got to think about operation. So often what we're doing is, or designers are doing, or people coming up with these projects, they are actively trying to think about increasing people riding bikes, and that's wonderful and important. Our role as auditors, while we are very supportive, we got to consider, okay, are we actually going to create safety issues? I think this was an interesting one to Amana about at a design stage where they were putting like a staging spot for a bike, because 2-lane roundabouts very problematic on bikes, and this happened to have quite a bit of bike traffic. So I was saying, okay, well, let's have a little staging so they can pause here, and then they can go when there's a safe time to do it. So I mean, from an audit perspective, you sort of look at that and go, well, okay, there might be a little bit of benefit, but I see some dangers associated with that. Mine are, well, you're going to fit one cyclist in there, is that right? And then what does the second one do, and where are they going to prop? And then and then also you've got larger vehicles tracking around here, and if you got the cyclist standing there, there's a fair chance that they're going to get clipped. So it's not a great and not a great idea. I mean, Kathy Reese, who used to be one of our road designers, he calls this the mammal pouch. Spot for the middle-aged men in Lycra to pause. So this one was an interesting one. Again, as a road safety audit, you look at this at design stage, and even with a bit more detail, and it all looks pretty good. So you've got the bike gets this sort of separated, raised path to navigate through this roundabout if they're going straight. Going right is a bit more problematic, but and you go, oh, that all looks very good. Looks like it's signed. Okay. And then you go out and have a look at it built, and it's there, but I think most cyclists would just sort of go, oh, okay, battle it through the roundabout again, because it kind of just looks like the bike lane ends, doesn't it? Yes, there's, it's a little bike only. What is that actually referring to? And so, some green paint. It's green, actually. Green available. Some green marking there would just have done an amazing job to indicate that that facility, all that money that's spent, is actually for cyclists. So I think that could work quite nicely. And there's a sort of example of using green marking to sort of highlight a direction of travel for bikes. That's not its traditional use, a green mark. Green markings were invented to point out to a driver a conflict point with a bike, and so that a driver would be more aware to look for bikes because they could be coming through this path. It's more expanded now to also include that, directional. And if anybody can work out bike colors from around the world, I applaud you, because there's no conformity worldwide in what color to use. So dooring, I'm sure you're all aware of the issue. There is a hazard of the cyclist hitting the door, and there's also a big hazard of the cyclist sort of being struck and falling into the traffic lane. And that's where we've seen quite a few fatalities across Australia and New Zealand of the secondary impact. Then, so see some serious injuries and injuries associated with hitting the door, but it's, when they get that secondary impact is pretty horrific. And putting bike lanes, bike symbols and the like is, it's not particularly helpful in terms of the dooring. There's some studies that show it does a little bit in terms of reduces the likelihood, but it's really not dealing with the issue. But the separated facilities, Copenhagen style lanes where you push parking out and then you provide the cyclists the complete free run is again the gold standard. Its safety performance is excellent. If you're auditing the design of these facilities, things to just look out for are the sight lines on vehicles entering and exiting, roads and driveways, because cars will have sight line blocking. Just thinking about pedestrians crossing and buses and bus stops and those sort of things. I think there's some stuff going on in the chat, Kathy. I'll get to that in a second if you want to have a look and summarize anything. So this one, so this is out of the New Zealand guidance document, so you can have a look at that there. But entering and exiting driveways can be a challenge, and the idea to slow the vehicle on that entry point is very good, and I like this style. Or you can use like a cobblestone, bluestone treatment through here. You're really just trying to stop that fast dart of a vehicle in. And of course, at some situations, we are going to actively want to slow the cyclists down because of a particular conflict point, a pedestrian crossing or the like. And so you can do raised treatments. You can do raised treatments on bike facilities like this one, again in Christchurch. To the raised bit there, slowing cyclists on the approach to this pedestrian crossing. So that is an option. We like to try to give cyclists a good free run, to encourage lots of cycling, but sometimes you need to consider that. And somebody mentioned, you have to sign. But if you've got a shared path facility or a bike facility and crosses a road, but you want to provide priority to the cyclist. It's a good form to do. I always like to see it raised, but you kind of mark it like a road. So there are a couple of Australian examples, but I've got a New Zealand example here, where, yeah, I mean, you make that bike path crossing, you kind of make it into a road. Like, it's an intersection now, and the bike path is the priority road as such through. Now, the sightline calculations on this are, well, I was going to say best practice is very complicated in how to do this. I can share a document with anybody who's interested, because you're trying to factor in the, you kind of do sightline analysis like you do a roundabout to a degree, which is trying to provide both the bike and the vehicle with enough time to stop should one not stop. So you could argue that you only need safe gap sight distance at this location. So for those who aren't familiar with safe gap sight distance, that would be that a car's going to come up to here and they're going to stop. They're going to look and check whether they've got a safe gap, and then they'll go, right? And theoretically that works, but in practice we know that the drivers are less diligent at these locations. We would like them to be, and so what we're trying to do is have it so that a bike rider coming in at their speed has enough line of sight to see a vehicle and go, hey, they're not going to stop, and the car has enough to go, oh, I can see them and I have to stop, and then that's how it all works out. Done a fair bit in this one's pretty good actually, in the sense that it sort of will slow a driver on the approach to this. With a chicane, you can do it with raised platforms, speed humps, cushions. So trying to slow that vehicle down on the approach is actually quite beneficial in terms of making sure you don't have to have exorbitant sightlines. Yeah, so you're providing that clear run through. We're going on time. We'll take questions in a second there, and Kathy, you can have a look and summarize. Just want to point out that a lot of local area traffic management features would squeeze a bike in with the car. So chicanes often do it, one-way slow points, and these sort of features. And that presents a pinch point and a danger for a cyclist. There are lots of good features like this one, which have cyclist bypass facilities. So it is a good local area traffic management feature, and the bikes just, they're not caught up in that squeeze point and that conflict. So you provide that by facility. So if I am part of an audit team for a local area traffic management plan, amongst the many things you'd be looking at, one is how a cyclist going to get through here, and we actually going to, while we're doing a good job slowing vehicles throughout, are we going to squeeze cyclists in at certain points? Okay, before I give a few tips on shared path, Kathy, you got anything that I need to deal with?
We can we get some thoughts on preferences for bidirectional versus unidirectional separated cycleways?
Yeah, unidirectional, if you can possibly do it, is safer. Like, the reason it's safer in general is predominantly entry and exit of other vehicles across the path, and the unexpected bike from a direction. So they'll look at, so I think probably if we had only ever done bidirectional cyclanes, it might be better. The drivers are always sort of aware it could be coming from both directions, but that's the dominant problem we see with bidirectional. The other challenge is where you start it and end it. And you have to be very careful about how you then take one side of the road cyclists, and then you're trying to navigate them onto onto one side or split them. And we see you can do it, and there's certainly signal phasing and signal design operations that you can do it, but we do see a lot of violating of that, even when they're done, because you have to sort of second phase it or do a diagonal across an intersection, because there's, bike rider comes up and they're going to have to get to the other side to continue on.
Is there a requirement to warn cyclists of speed humps in their cycle lane, or is the hatching over the hump enough?
That might be one to put out to the group and see if anybody knows of anything actually documented anywhere. But I mean, from an auditor perspective, I would take go back to the principles of why we warn and how we warn any vehicle of a raised area, and if we believe it's hard to be seen for one reason or another, you'd certainly warn it with signage, and you'd make sure it's well lit, so it's able to be seen from that perspective.
Could you give us a quick explanation of the difference between segregation and separation with regards to cycle lanes?
So I would say separation is in the road reserve, but you physically separate with some sort of island or barrier system or the like, and when you go outside of the road reserve, you're into segregation and you're creating a path like the one that we can see on screen there. For example, that is a fully segregated facility. It doesn't interact with driveways and roads and those sort of things. I mean, it crosses roads, but not in the, it's not in that road reserve.
Good one. Okay. I think we are an hour in, so and I know you've still got a bit more cycling bits and pieces to cover off. Also, just an earlier comment, Ken's done a bit of keywifying of the slides, and so I will upload a version to the learning management system that better reflects the one he's presenting on today.
Yeah, thank you. So I better be quick on this, but as I mentioned, you undertake a road safety audit or a safe system audit of a bike path in not really any different form that you would a normal road safety audit, except for you're really going to ride it, and ideally walk it, but mostly you ride it. And there I am with my audit team and riding along, and you're looking for all of those things that present issues: the width of the path, obstacles, hazards, intersections, surface conditions, and the like. Intersection of two paths, you can kind of think about like an intersection in a road. You want good, clear priority and good sight lines and warning, and 90-degree intersections if possible. So you don't want wide intersections and the like. That one's a bit unclear, you can see there, which is like, okay, which, and you can imagine that if you had a lot of cyclists and pedestrians, and it would be a bit messy. And this one again is very unclear as you approach this. Who's got priority? That's actually, we talked earlier about this is essentially intersection. You're creating splitter islands for the bike there, so it's a good way to sort of highlight an intersection as well. Drop-offs, we think about them as hazards, even sort of smaller drop-offs. Cycle shared paths are particularly problematic because of all of that extra activity where you've got dogs and kids and all sorts of things. So a cyclist will likely at some point be having to deviate off the path, and we need to provide that little bit of rundown area as well. and thinking about, distance hazards are from the path and hazards within the path as well. And debris and the like. There are specific cyclist fencing that minimise the chance that a pedal or a handlebar snags. So this is not one of them. This is more what we'd see. It's the idea that fences are designed to have a shoulder rub up against it as the point of contact. And where we're separating vehicles from vulnerable road users using barriers, that's a very good thing, except for the back of the barriers then becomes a hazard for the riders. So you've got to think about that. Thinking about doing back barrier systems or some sort of protection on the back of the posts is a good thing as well. Yeah, think about your hazards in your path. We don't like this sort of stuff. It's obviously trying to stop vehicles getting into this area, but at night, that's certainly going to be a hazard. So those sort of treatments like this are preferable, where you do, you'd like to get rid of that cable, stay up the middle of the path, but sometimes these things happen. Advanced line marking to indicate something's coming up, in case you've got multiple cyclists and maybe they've got their head down or something. And then flexible bollards, so those when struck will flex, and ensuring that they have good retroreflectivity. So not on a USB, I've got to change that. In the learning management system, you can find some sheets on these thematic cycling audits and a few tips and tricks if you want to have a look at those. And we don't have time for the quiz.
No, we don't, but quick question, please. What are your thoughts on cyclists within the deflection zone of the barrier?
So ideally, you would not have a cyclist. You would have a buffer between the barrier and your path, which would be equivalent to the deflection zone nominated by that product system, the barrier type for the speed environment. That's easy to say, and I could stop there, but the reality is in a lot of situations you just absolutely cannot achieve that, and I'm okay with that. If it's the best you can do, having a barrier system is going to be better, because we know those deflections are based on test facility deflection. So that's a vehicle hitting it usually at 100 kilometers an hour at a 25-degree angle, and it's its maximum deflection. The reality is most of the strikes will be vehicles at shallower angles and drifting off and hitting it, and that will deflect them and the like, and they'll go nowhere near like the cyclist. So you're going to get a far better feature. You're also, vehicles, when they leave the road and onto a path, they will often run quite a distance along the path. So even if we have a vehicle and it did hit it at a large angle and it deflected a fair bit, they would be off the path very quickly. So all of the protection of the rest of that path is good. So really, if somebody's saying no, we can't do that because we can't get deflection requirements, it doesn't cut it, in my opinion.
Okay, Ken, we might have a quick break. You need to have a cup of tea and a throat lozenge, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And are you okay? You've got a cold, maybe a bit rough?
I'm all right.
Okay, good.
Doing well.
All right. Sorry, being mean to you. We will have a very short break to give you time for your cup of tea and and some water. We'll come back with that tricky quiz question from last time round. Do a quick look at that, and then we'll go to motorcyclists. Is that right?
I'll be quick on motorcyclists. In fact, I'm going to hide a few slides in this break.
Okay, great. Thanks. So 3 minutes.
I would say are the most forgotten road user. Some people will say pedestrians are, but I reckon motorcyclists are, in terms of people thinking about their safety and their requirements for safe travel. Really don't get, and it's very challenging. I agree with that. But there is some information available. I'll point you to that and some stuff we can think about as auditors and ensure that we are doing our part. But motorcyclists are 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured for the equivalent journey compared to a car. So that's like the risk profile is huge, and that's for a variety of reasons. I mean, the vulnerability and the speed are big ones. And this document, the Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly document, is available, and there is a New Zealand version from the Motorcycle Safety Advisory Council of New Zealand, which is this document in the middle there. And there's other versions of it from other jurisdictions. They're all pretty much the same because they're all based off the original one that some colleagues and I developed back at Vic Roads, and it provides just some key features of road design, maintenance management that are far more of an impact for motorcyclists than other road users. And so I base a fair bit of this off that content. We talk often about the 5 S's for motorcycle safety when we're thinking about auditing and, are we doing the best we can for safety for motorcyclists? Sight, surface, sign, strike, and speed. And I'll go through those one at a time shortly. Just a little check here that I've still got everybody. What's the formula for risk again? What's the formula for risk? I'll put in the chat. Risk is there we go. Yep, all coming in. Kathy, you can work out who was first. Likelihood times severity, or likelihood times consequence, or probability times consequence. The chance of incident, and then how bad that, the severity, that's what we're thinking about. And then when we think about those 5 S's, we go, sights, surface, and signs. It's the chance of the crash. That's trying to stop crashes happening. Strike is severity, consequence, like how do we manage that? And speed is this magic thing across the board. It reduces the chance of a crash happening. But if the crash happens, the severity is also less. So it's hugely important. Okay, so I'll just very briefly jump through those 5 S's with some photos to just reinforce some of that. Motorcyclists smaller than even small vehicles, obviously, and can be hidden behind small things. So you can, this is just a photo just to show very small sign blocking a good portion of a bike. So signs, poles, trees, signal controller boxes, these are all things that are probably not considered sightline impediments in general, but certainly for riders, they can be quite an issue. Also, the riders, in terms of their sightlines, their forward sightlines, is quite important in understanding the road environment, not creating any surprises for the riders. So really good advanced warning. Motorcyclists have been found to be the most alert road user when it comes to signage and what we're providing with signage information, and they act accordingly or prepare themselves accordingly. So we have good opportunity to lessen the likelihood of crashes associated with that. Okay, this is a sign that's been out for trial in a number of jurisdictions, and as I understand, it is accepted as a trial sign in New Zealand. I asked Julian Chisnell that at one point, and he said, yeah, it can be used as a trial basis. Does anybody know, like you can see this is a curve that tightens up. Does anybody know what the actual name of that type of curve is from a geometric perspective? It's got a very specific name in road design. Yeah, Brent's onto that, Kathy. it's a compound curve. So a hairpin would just be one that goes very tight with a single radius. Spirals, yeah, not bad, I guess. And it could be out of context as is described there, but that any curve out could be out of context as well. This sign is particularly useful where you are up in those mountainous areas, popular motorcycle routes often, and you've got a compound curve. The reason it's so useful is that a rider on this type of curve, they take a lot of clues on the speed and the line by what they can see in that radius. And if you have a double radius, like it tightens up on it, often the riders will find themselves in a position where, you know, it tightens up on them and they go on the wrong side of the road, or they go into the road environment. This sign seems to, like, you pre-warn those with like if you just do it with a normal sign and a speed advisory, it's good, but the riders are also, you know, looking at the road environment. So we've had a lot of problems with these compound curves on motorcycle routes. Here's actually like a real world example of a 252 radius curve into a 117 radius curve, and 4 run-off road motorcycle crashes outside of curve as it tightens up. So yeah, I think it's a vivid example. So a motorcyclist could be either vehicle 1 or vehicle 2, but in more often than not, we find motorcyclists as one of those, which is where a vehicle's turning and another vehicle's approaching. Which do you think is more likely to be the motorcyclist? It could be either, but we do see a bit more of a dominant pattern of yes, two. That's right. And cyclists are subject to a lot of the same challenges, but the driver in one sort of, the sight lines are blocked, and motorcyclists being smaller are hidden behind cars and the like quite easily. So you can see that Pajero there, that white vehicle is doing that turn into that site that we would just have the aerial of. That truck is going to block all sight lines, well, of all vehicles. We get a lot of other crashes in this scenario as well. Just a motorcyclist is going to, it just has that vulnerability that it's a worse severity. Also, smaller cars and things, motorcycles are a bit harder to see. And there's our sort of tree blocking the sight line, the motorcyclists behind it, just showing that as well. So if you can keep those sight triangles clear of even those sort of things, that's beneficial. Obviously, we're not going to get rid of that tree because it's very nice, but you can think about managing speeds and okay, this is just a couple of pictures to remind you that a rider takes a curve or a corner and they lean to do so, which shifts their center of gravity and means that surface becomes this really important thing for a motorcyclist. And anywhere that a rider is leaning or braking, we want to try to provide these really good surfaces. We'd like it everywhere, but those are our most critical spots. And we want that good skid resistance, and we want a smooth surface. But unfortunately, of course, we see all sorts of depressions in the road. We see different potholes and blowouts and slips and flushing, and even gravel and debris from roadworks or side roads and all of these things. The motorcyclists are the canary in the coal mine for all of this sort of stuff. Yes, they're an issue for others, but motorcyclists are the ones that are going to be killed first. And just even things like patching and where patches are going to break up first on the joins and how we put them in rider lines. These are all challenges that we face in managing our road system for motorcyclists. So all I'm trying to do in this presentation is make you aware and thinking about some of this. Okay, each of those individual circumstances you look at as an auditor as a design or even if it's an existing road and you're doing that kind of thinking through it. they all come up with their sort of specific nuances for you to think about. But motorcyclists certainly need to be part of your thinking about safety for traveling public. And if we have things like this on, we need to warn, well, this one, I don't have the photos from the lead up to it, but it's on a curve, it's on a popular motorcycle route, and it's not well signed. And a rider is really locked into their riding line as they come to this. And there is no option to go inside it. Their options are to try to go through it, which they will pull the bike upright and they'll go out, or to go on the outside. And either way, they're going into the other lane. So we've got to pre-warn of that. Of course, ideally, the patches would be better and wouldn't need this, but, you know, sometimes that happens. Think about the use of steel plates, service covers, and anything like that. That's going to be very slippery for a rider if it's wet. You might think, well, they'll see that for sure. Look at the size of it. You do have to think about a rider following, behind other vehicles at night, raining a bit. It's not good for cyclists either. There are skid resistance covers that can be used. You can colour them as well. Like that one. The bolts are coming up on that one, aren't they? And yeah, if you are looking at a design and you're seeing that their services are in the road, as an auditor, it's a decent thing to just question whether they could be relocated. Sometimes very hard to do that, and sometimes they will just sort of come back and say, well, the cost to do that outweighs the cost of the whole roundabout or something like that, and they can't do it. But that's not going to be good. This one's in Rotorua, and it's in a roundabout. A rider is looking all around to check for these vehicles entering and coming at them. They're on a bit of a lean sometimes, so we don't like surface deficiencies in those sorts of scenarios. We don't like them anywhere, but these are starting to get more problematic. So we can improve skid resistance, water blasting, improve the surface from that perspective, and that will help our riders. Curbing, simply put, the more mountable the curb, the better for a motorcyclist. However, to manage water, we need to often use particular curbing and the like. So you can't have fully mountable curbing everywhere, but it does help to provide that little bit of runoff for a rider. Now, I can almost guarantee if you're doing a lot of auditing, safe system auditing, you will come across a design that wants to paint something big on the road. Now, paint on the road is an important thing, but we need to think about where we use it and how sparingly we use it. This sort of stuff is going to get slippery, even if the line markers tell you, oh no, it's got great skid resistance. Yeah, well, that's when it's first put down, and then give it a little bit of time and it'll polish up, and it gets quite slippery. So trying to just minimize where we're doing that and thinking about, is it an area where a rider is going to be braking hard or leaning? And these are particularly problematic. One that I've seen a good handful of times in my career is that somebody has an intersection that has an overshoot problem. So people are missing the intersection and they want to paint a big stop sign or a big give way sign, yield sign at the intersection. And that is like, a rider is also going to be subject to a see-through effect or this potential overshooting. And so they'll be slamming their brakes on hard right at that point, and then you're going to put a potential skid resistance issue right at the most critical point for the rider. So that's where we need to think about them particularly. And there's a comment that's come in. that curbing can also provide some protection for pedestrians and cyclists. A bit. Just, I think there's a perception that like curbing will do more than it actually does. So there are types of curbing. They're high profile barrier curb. It would be that actually will redirect a vehicle. A normal barrier curb doesn't do anything for a vehicle. Very, some sort of shallow drift offs to help a little bit. So there is some benefit, but yeah, there are curbs. If you're actually trying to physically protect a cycle facility or a pedestrian facility from a roadway, a normal curb doesn't cut it. It's really not a redirective device. You can warn particularly of issues for motorcyclists using this sign, which is used in New Zealand. I think it's a slightly different design of it, but it is. And yeah, again, motorcyclists are quite attuned to this warning, and we'll look out for that. Obviously, try to rectify the underlying issue rather than just warn of it. But in the interim, you can do that. And okay, so spent a fair bit of time analysing motorcycles and strike hazards and what sort of forces motorcycles can tolerate and where we're seeing riders striking objects and the like. So I've got a graduate at one point to analyse a heap of motorcycle crashes on curves just to check where things were happening. So 79% of the outside of a curve, which is kind of physics tells you that's going to be the case. I suppose cars are about a 50-50 inside of outside of curve in terms of overcorrection. Riders don't have that overcorrection luxury, I suppose. So the outside of curve is pretty important. And this was an interesting one, doing some auditing of the Coromandel area, and very popular motorcycle area. Many of you have no doubt holidayed up in the area. It's a beautiful part of the country. And yeah, we've got some surface issues, we've got outside of curve, and we've got these concrete sort of post things being used. So obviously going to be a hazard for a rider. It's not going to be good for vehicles as well. The vehicles will probably, in this particular scenario, be going at a speed low enough that that's unlikely to present major injuries for vehicle occupants, but a rider certainly would be in a lot of trouble. And signs themselves, signposts are a hazard for riders. So moving certainly to a galvanised steel post or a fluted aluminium post these days in New Zealand, but that is easily strong enough to kill a rider. Don't be fooled into thinking that fluted aluminium is somehow frangible for motorcyclists. That's a myth. Those things are very strong. Frangible for a car, absolutely. But these are more the types of things that we know are friendly for motorcyclists, where they're flexible sign ranges and support posts. These have maintenance challenges. They have challenges on the height. You can actually do these because of wind load and flopping around, but there are some products available. Okay, riders lean going around corners. I talked about that. So think about the placement of furniture. Think about curbing and foot pegs. So motorbikes have these foot pegs, and if there's curbing that juts out in particular spots, and that a rider could catch a foot peg, they could. This will be taken out by a truck before a motorcyclist, in my opinion. But and there you go. There's a staged photo of a rider leaning around a corner, just to show a bit of lean there. So adding that into your thinking. And of course, if you have roadside hazards, we think about putting a barrier system there. We know that's a very good form of protection for road users. And barriers are very specifically designed. They're designed for cars and trucks, sometimes trucks, but cars predominantly. And motorcyclists have some different challenges. So lots and lots of research into motorcyclists and barriers, and to summarize it, half the motorcyclists are on the ground sliding when they strike a barrier system. They've already come off the bike and they're sliding. The other half hit the barrier and they go over the top very quickly. They don't run along the system. But we have underrun protection, and so I use the term underrun protection because some people say rub rail. Rub rail is a type of underrun protection, but there is also lots of proprietary products these days that kind of look like this, but there are particular ones. So motorcycle protection rail, moto tub, and well, always check your Wakatahi approved product list, so you know. But the idea is that at least those ones that are sliding, they hit this rather than a post. So you could imagine a rider sliding along here at 60 kilometers an hour because they came off the bike earlier along, they hit one of those posts, huge trouble. If they hit that, they're going to hit it and slide along it. It's not going to be particularly friendly, but they will survive and have more minor injuries. You can retrofit underarm protection. So if you're looking at a motorcycle route, it's got existing barrier systems, you can usually retrofit underarm protection to it, as they're doing here. So how much time have I got, Kathy? Probably just got enough to take people through a little bit of motorcycle barrier explanation. There is a European crash test standard for motorcyclists with barrier systems, and it involves getting a motorcycle or getting a normal crash test dummy, and well, you do a little bit of welding of its neck and its thumbs, but that's a different story. Then you put it into leathers and a helmet, and then they was crashing some cars into them, but then you slide it on a sled and you throw it at the post and between the post. And so that was without underrun, and this one is with underrun protection. And you can see the first one is unsurvivable, this one is survivable and passes the test. It passes it at 60 kilometers per hour at 25-degree angle, in terms of that's not going to provide severe injuries to the rider. It will provide injuries to the rider, but if I play it again, that's dead for sure at 60 kilometers an hour. In fact, that motorcycle crash test dummy in that one was a write-off. So the New South Wales government spent another $300,000 getting another motorcycle crash test dummy after they did the post test. So the flexibility there is somewhat helpful, but it's the redirection of it and the fact that the rider slides along it. And so you can see there underarm protection nicely put on the barrier there on the curve. Anybody know why they decided to stop it here rather than continuing it all the way up to the end? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Yes. So everybody who said end terminal is correct. Well done. So that is if you know about barriers, that's all the end terminal of the barrier. So that's a particularly specifically engineered point of the barrier system that's been tested in its own right, and there at the moment isn't any product that you can actively retrofit to a barrier end terminal that's been tested. And so the danger here is that if we continued the underrun protection all the way up here, we're unsure about this, we may compromise the functioning of this. So if a vehicle was to hit the end of this, it may not concertina on itself the way it should. It may spear the vehicle. So we're unsure of how that would operate because nobody's tested it. So the advice these days is you don't attach anything to your end terminals. If you're in a situation where you're worried about that spot, you'd bring the barrier further up. And I think if somebody mentioned it, it's like they have kind of brought this to a degree out enough that hopefully most riders wouldn't hit that location if they did come off on the curve, but you may want to adjust that. So wire rope safety barriers, motorcyclists, the motorcycle community is now fairly good at knowing the actual facts on this, that wire rope safety barriers are not a particular hazard compared to other barriers. So there's a lot of talk about cheese cutter and the wires are going to slice the riders and these sort of things. There's all the analysis is that a rider is going to be hitting the posts or going over the top of it. The wires are not going to play a role. They have not played a role in any of the crashes associated with motorcyclists and barrier systems. The only thing I'd say is that there is not really a good retrofit device. There's not an underrun protection device for any of the wire rope systems. So on a popular motorcycle route, you really would never use wire rope safety barrier, not necessarily because of any increased risk to motorcycles. You just physically can't most of the time because often those have curves and they're curvy roads, and you can't install this type of barrier system on a curve like that if you're looking down on it, because it's the way those barriers work is you put your ropes in, you put your posts in, you put your ropes in, and then you tension it up. And so, of course, if you're looking down on the road, I mean, you tension that. Well, anything tighter than about a 200 radius curve, you start to see your posts bend in as you tighten. And in fact, that's specified. You can't put wire rope system on anything tighter than a 200. So, and a lot of motorcycle routes have curves in that, so you wouldn't even use it. But there's wonderful flexible W-beam systems available. So why would you even bother on those? People have tried sort of football goalpost padding style treatments around the posts of wire rope systems. And it's not going to be that effective. It might do something in some crashes, but really you're trying to manage energy there by absorbing it in a very short period of time rather than running energy along the system if you have an underrun protection. Little tip, make sure that you check that they install the rub rail as it's meant to be, which is with a bracket that it sits out. You don't want to have gaps. You don't want to have gaps like that because, well, there you go. You can get your leg in there, you can get an arm in there, and it's just you're not getting the advantages you want. And gaps and things cause trouble in that. You want to try to make it all as flush as you can. And finally, speed's very important. And motorcyclists, we can influence speed of riders through good delineation and speed advisory signs like this one. Regulatory speed limits work really well. One of the things you often do if you're doing a motorcycle audit of a whole route is be really critically checking that the advisory speeds are appropriate for the types of curves. So no surprises, no, coming into this one, oh, gee, that's actually was, the 35 back there was way sharper than this one, or vice versa. And that's where that inconsistency causes trouble. And I mentioned motorcycle audits a few times, and certainly New Zealand does do motorcycle audits. They seem to come in waves and batches for some reason or another. But that's where a rider will be part of the audit team, and they'll be providing advice from on the bike, and the audit team maybe in a trailing car, and they'll be stopping, and you'll get info, and you'll be writing it up as per a normal one. So this was one, and there we go. We've got our rider out there who's got a microphone in her helmet. She's talking to the car behind, saying, "Oh, worried about this and see this, and then okay, there's avoiding this pit lid, and the auditors in the car are also looking at things, and it's all filmed, and this one we're interested in the back of that barrier system in the middle of the road being exposed." So we just thought, oh well, imagine if a rider was overtaking in this lane and a car pulled in front of it, which is very common because riders are harder to see, and that the rider may be pushed into there and then snag on that barrier. So there's also a bit of advice on thematic audits for motorcyclists, which we'll put in the learning management system as well. And Kathy, I had a case study which I don't think I'll do because I pre-recorded it, and we should be able to dig out a recording of that. If anybody would like to, see a bit of a case study for motorcycle safety and rectification and the like, you can watch that extra bit of video. But I wanted to give enough time, Kathy, for you to take us through the actual audit, safe system audit that people are going to be doing. Well, it's modified and it's trimmed down so it doesn't take everybody a week. It takes them only a few hours. But are there any questions to deal with first?
I think we're good with questions at the moment. So what I'll do is just find, go through what people need to do. Yeah,
and if anybody does have any questions, cycling, well, interestingly, I reckon there's just such wonderful knowledge around cycling safety in industry and available there, that you've got lots of places to turn to for advice around that. Motorcycle safety specifics, I think we're really lacking, and so I'm more than happy to provide lots of intel because I spent a lot of my life doing motorcycle safety stuff, and if I can help out people there, sing out, and I'll try and help.
Let's very quickly brought up that quiz question that may have thrown a few people off, and pop this one here. So centerline wire rope safety barrier for head-on crashes. Does it sit in mainly reduced likelihood, mainly reduced severity, or reduces both likelihood and severity? And I think that one threw a few people. And what I'll refer you to is in the Safe System Assessment Framework. It actually lists here we go, head-on treatments. So it tells us that a flexible median barrier influences severity. And we tend to think it influences likelihood. But we also don't want to go against the guidance.
Yeah.
Is that about?
You're going to have to give people the points if they said severity.
Absolutely.
That's what Ostrodes
for sure
said. But
yes,
we've certainly we've talked to Ostrodes about this, and added to the list of if we do an update to it, we'll alter it. The reason we say that is that it just doesn't make sense, because we're basically saying, okay, either your barrier is strong enough that you just say nobody's breaching this barrier, there will be no vaulting of it, there'll be no going through the barrier, and in which case you go, that's exposure. We're not exposed to head-on crashes in those scenarios. If you have a physical test level 5 barrier system down the middle of your motorway, you're not going to have head-on crashes, right? You just can't get them, right? But then if you go into flexible barrier systems, we know they're very effective, but sometimes people vault them, breach them, and the like. And when they do that, the head-on crash is still the head-on crash at the speed it was going to happen. So what we're actually doing is reducing the likelihood of that crash. But Austroads has gone with the severity because it's a barrier system, and we usually talk about barrier systems always reducing the severity of crashes, because hitting the barrier system is still a crash. So they're more focused on that. Okay, you've hit the barrier system, but we would say that's not a head-on crash. That's a, well, run-off road crash, if you're going to call it anything, when you hit that barrier system. So you can see why we had our engineers shouting at each other in the office about this. And yeah, we apologize that it went in and that you were then shouting at your computer, no doubt, as to why you got that wrong. But Kathy's going to fix that and give you the marks.
Absolutely. And we'll continue to have interesting conversations about these things. Okay, so here we are in module 4, which is today's module. And you're in the section which is the complete your road safety audit site visit. Now, as mentioned in the last session, you've each got a site, and hopefully you have had a look and it is still within a reasonable distance to where you currently live or work. And basically, and the template is in here as well. So we'll just open that up. So basically what we need you to do over the course of the next week or two, so we give you 2 weeks to get this one in, is you have a look at your site plan. So I'll just download one of those as an example. And you go out and do a site visit. Now, you do need to also have a look at the swims that we've popped in there. I'll just go back a step. There we go, safe work method statement, and agree with that. And that's just about you. When you get out to site, you act in a safe and appropriate manner, make sure you wear a high-vis vest, and make sure that you don't need to get out there onto the road and measure lane widths or anything like that. We're not asking you to do anything of that detailed nature. So we've given you a template, and what we've asked you to do is basically do the highlighted section. So most of it is in there for you. So anywhere you see a highlighted section is the areas that you need to fill in. And there's some helpful, useful information in there telling you exactly what you need to do. Just in regards to the audit team. So if there are other colleagues that have got the same site as you and you would like to do it as a team, you can do it as a team. And so we need you to write all the members of the team that you were doing the audit with, but you each need to write your own report and submit your own report, if that makes sense. So you fill in here a bit about the project background and objective. We only need something very brief here. Anything that's crossed out, you don't need to do. You're not doing the safe system assessment matrix in this part. And Ken, do you want to jump in here? Put you on the spot. Here we go.
Yes. So we put an example in there to just show you what sort of level of information we'd be expecting. So snippets of the design, so I can see your email now, Kathy. That's all we're seeing on screen.
Sorry.
And yeah, so as an example, so you're writing up the finding, try and follow that formula that we talked about, issue, crash that's going to happen, factors that influence risk, any standards or guidelines that are applicable if they're applicable, but you don't need to put that in at all. Nice little snip of the design or a photo from the site pointing at the issue. That's all looking very good. And you can see there that the drop down, so it says minor there, that's a drop down. And then over the left there's likely, that's a drop down as well, up there. And then up the top is where the risk rating is, up there. It says moderate, so that's another drop down. And sorry, you got a recommendation to do. Go up. Yeah, there's a recommendation, and we want to see that safe system supporting, safe system primary treatment. You got to categorize your treatment. So there's sort of the things you've got to do is write up your finding, put the risk rating in, put a recommendation, and a safe system categorization with it. You leave all of that other stuff blank. I mean, that's always there for the designer to, or the safety engineer and the project manager to fill out their information. And in the other ones further down, we've highlighted the stuff we want you to do. So you'll do that for 3 findings. And don't do any more. I know that some of you will find, 20 things, but don't, well, like, we're not going to read more than your first 3. So, yeah, if you do more than that, you're spending your time doing it. We decided 3 is enough. Every one of them will have at least 3 things that could be presented. They will all have probably more than that. But if for some reason you're going, everything looks perfect here, I can't see a crash that's going to happen in the future at all, maybe get in contact and we'll have somebody sit down with you and sort of talk through some of the issues. You can always go to the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6 prompt lists and read through those questions. That will help you find issues. That's a very useful document. It would have hundreds and hundreds of questions in there for you to prompt your thinking, and will very much help you help you out there. So it's in resources, as Kathy's showing there, resources, reference documents and resources, or of course you can get this from the Austroads website. But there, a little bit back, there you go. So you'd be looking at sort of the feasibility stage / preliminary stage designs. We haven't given anybody detailed design just because it's, we don't want you to actually have to take a week to pour through documentation and things like that. We just want you to prove that you've got your head around this idea. But so those questions would be good. You could drift into detailed design. It's just you're going to have a lot more of them where you're just going to go, not applicable. I didn't give us swept path diagrams. I don't know what the drainage is. No, so that those earlier questions are good and they'll help you go, oh yeah, okay. I didn't think about where vehicles that are turning are going to block sight lines or those sorts of things. So then you complete all of that PDF. That helps us, and you upload it. And Kathy's in teacher mode. So if you switch yourself to a student mode, you will then, add submission, plonk it in. Now, you got 14 days and 7 hours and the clock is ticking. Okay, that's plenty of time because, as I say, it's a couple of hours work if you're going to do it well. And you're going to go and look at the site. You're going to do that very safely and carefully, but it doesn't need to be you don't need to be out on the site for very long because you're just gathering some context of how it looks and how it operates and other bits and pieces, imagining that design on the site and thinking about how it ties in and other implications like that. And because it's part of the syllabus of an audit course that you go to a site, you do that process. And so we do require you to go to that site and we want to see that you actually did that. And so we want a selfie or some photo of you at that site wearing your high-vis vest and safely there. There's an example of me. So in that Word document, you're going to replace me with you at your site, and that will be the sort of last thing there. We don't need you to put photos of your site. Like, we don't need all of the photos from all of the directions and things. In a normal safe system audit, you would put some photos of the site to show the different views and different things. You'd be putting some of that into issues. You may do that in this assignment. If one of them you go, I can see a particular issue here, and I'm going to take a photo of that and I'm going to put it into the actual finding, you could do that. But yeah, we don't need just photos. Anything I missed there, Kathy?
I think you've got it, Ken. So yeah, as Ken said, so you've got the template here, your site here, you submit it there, and click on one of the designs. Sorry. Oh, yeah. There you go. So some of them will be real designs. Some of them might have been made particularly for you. I mean, they're a design. It's done by a designer. But of course, if somebody comes out to you and asks you what's happening, what's being planned or the like, you just say you're on a training exercise. Don't be showing them some design and saying, oh, this is what they're planning to do to this site, because it may not absolutely be, and it's not your place to be doing that anyway. But here we go. This is like, oh, I like this. It's a big dog bone roundabout. Yeah, very interesting. I don't know this one at all. Has it got who's designed it? It looks like it. No, it's been taken off, has it? Mm.
Yeah. So what would you be thinking about that? I'd be thinking about, are we squeezing cyclists up there on the entry and exit there? I mean, like, I've got a cycle lane right on the one side, but then it goes sharrows. Is that the best we can do there? How's that going to operate? Are we going to get queuing issues? Anyway, sorry, I'm doing somebody's audit for them. It's your job.
Happy for you to continue.
That's it. Any questions?
I'm just going to point out some other bits and pieces. So I will update this slide back shortly here, the cyclist one. And there they are. There's those motorcycle case study videos that Ken mentioned earlier, and some more information on thematic audit resources in here. There is sorry?
Couple of quick things I need to say. You do not go out there at night. In a normal audit, you would definitely go out there at night, but we have elected not to have that for our training exercise, just to cover off some occupational health and safety requirements. Do not go out there at night as part of this exercise. Thank you. And yeah, it will be a preliminary design or feasibility concept design. It's not going to make a big difference which you decide to look at. And most of these sort of sit as one or the other. So yeah, preliminary will be fine. Call it a preliminary design stage audit. Sorry, Kathy.
No, all good. And any findings, so they don't have to be, significant or serious or different. You just have to you just have to write up 3 findings. I think it looks like there's been a situation with the Wally quiz, so I will fix that one as well.
That would be in the last one, maybe, or this
one? No, I don't think there was a Wally question for that one, okay. But I think in today's one it might have gone off as well, with maybe some of those updated slides might have thrown a few things out. So I think we're out of time. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, please get in touch via email, and we will meet again for our last session this time next week, or 2 hours earlier than now next week. And that'll be our last session, which is another opportunity to ask any questions or bring any any issues that you've found or that you need some help with, there's a bit of time in that session. Actually, Ken, you won't be there. We're sending you away. So it'll be myself and Max, and that one will be run as a Zoom meeting. So there'll be a bit more of interaction with you all. You'll get to see each other. So I think that's it for now.
No session on Tuesday, that's correct, because you're doing your audit.
Yep, so the last session is next Thursday.
There's a bit of controversy on how many Wallies, but I think people have to keep an eye out for Wallies, so that may be correct. Anyway, bye everybody.